Whenever you're ready, Sally.
Okay, great. My name's Sally Robinson, and I'm the Vice President of the State Board for Issues and Advocacy. And in that role, I'm also Chair of the State Issues Committee, which coordinates the state issues specialists, most of whom are not state board members. The Issues Committee also takes the first look at any questions that arise from members or local leagues or from the issue specialist about applying national and state positions to state issues. Those of you who've been to convention have also seen me because I run the program part of convention. We are very fortunate at the State League to have a great group of volunteer issue specialists who work with the state board both as a resource and liaisons to other good government groups. We don't have the staff in the office for research and lobbying that some of the other statewide groups do, but we have a deep bench of committed specialists, some of whom have their own committees. So we're very fortunate to be able to hear from most of them today, and also to have all of you attend. And now I'll turn it over to Erica Smitka, our Executive Director.
Great. Thank you so much, Sally. Good morning, everyone. I think I know many of you, but for those of you I don't know, as Sally said, my name is Erica Smitka, and I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of New York State. Thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday morning. The webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the PowerPoint along with a list of any links that are put into the chat will be sent out to all attendees after the event. So don't worry about taking notes, just sit back and enjoy. Let's see. So the focus of this webinar will really be on how you can take action in state advocacy. We're going to talk about some of the hot button issues that we expect to see come up this session. And we're going to introduce you to several people whom, as Sally said, without these folks, the State League staff truly couldn't do the work that we do. So I'll first start off by talking about how we lobby on the state level, and then I'll introduce our issue specialists who are going to talk about their specific topic area, and then we'll have some time for questions. On the call with us today, we've got our 8 issue specialists, and we have several state board members, most of whom will be introducing themselves at some point throughout this presentation. And so in the interest of time, we will do that as we move our way through. Just a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, you can answer them in the chat. You can ask them in the chat box, and our issue specialists or State League staff or board members will get to your question either as the presentations are going or at the end of the session. We will have some time for questions both on the process, like how we do things here, and also on some specific issue areas after the presentation. Before we really get going, and throughout the presentation today, I want you all to think about the core reason why we're all here, why so many of us have joined the League of Women Voters. It's because we know the importance of defending a democracy where we all have a voice, where our government is transparent and accountable, and where equity is expected and demanded. On the national scale, we've been facing increasing attacks on our democracy. We have been talking a lot with the League of Women Voters of the US, and they will be releasing some guidance and feedback on these national issues. This webinar will really give you the overview of the work that we can do on the state level to push back against some of this rhetoric. All of the work that you'll hear about today, and all of the work we do on specific issues, whether it be healthcare, the environment, education, we're only able to do this work because we live in a democratic society, which is why it's more critical now than ever that we focus on keeping our democracy strong. Got a lot to get through today, so I'm going to dive right in, and we're going to start off with the different levels of the League. So one of my absolute favorite things about the League is that, and really what makes us such a strong organization, is that we're a grassroots organization that builds from the bottom up. This allows us to be member-driven, and it also allows for your voice to be heard throughout the issues that we take action on. It's crucial as an organization that we speak with one voice, and so each different level has a role in that. So the responsibilities at each level are are this. So at the local level, local leagues take action on local issues, and you all can work together regionally to address regional issues in a consistent manner. At the local level, only the president or someone designated by the president is able to speak for your local league, although members can take action on issues at any time as individuals. What does that mean? It means that you are, of course, your own person, and you can always take action as yourself. You just cannot represent the league or associate yourself with the league unless you have that approval from your president or you've been designated to speak on behalf of your league by someone on your board staff or on your board. At the state level, we're responsible for all messaging on state issues and ensuring that that messaging is consistent. We work with our many issue specialists and our state issues and advocacy committee that's made up of myself, Nancy Rosenthal, who is the president of the New York State League. Nancy, I'm so sorry, I meant to introduce you at the top of this call. Sally Robinson and Michelle Lamberti. We work together to come up with appropriate responses to issues, and if a local league wants to take action on a state issue, they must reach out to the state league first. Lastly, the U.S. League is responsible for determining policies and strategies that ensure consistent messaging on national issues, and really that we're being consistent all across the country. So in a similar way, the State League can't take action on any national issues without talking to U.S. first. All right. So we could talk about the difference between all three of those levels all day long, but today we're only going to focus on state advocacy. And it's really important that we look at the lens and the system that we have to work within here in New York State in order to take that action. So this is an overview of the New York State executive and legislative calendar. All members should receive the legislative update that comes out on Fridays, which gives you a little sneak peek into what's been going on at the Capitol that past week. So you may be familiar with some of what's been happening already, but I'm going to do my best to walk through it in a timely manner here. So at the very start of January, the governor presents her or his State of the State, and the legislative session begins. This year it was a very exciting State of the State. We had a lot of performers. Committee meetings, the legislature will start to convene, they will start to work, but they're really not focused on passing bills until we see the budget pass. Mid to late January, the governor will present her proposed state budget, which she did on January 21st of this year. And then after that, the legislature, it's made up of the Senate and the Assembly, will hold 14 joint budget meetings or hearings to hear from not only advocates like the League, but they're looking to hear from organizations and departments within the state on if they think that the funding allocated in the budget is sufficient for the work that they have to do that year. So we will be testifying this upcoming week on February 4th on our elections. Late February, the governor will issue amendments to her budget. These are typically really technical amendments that don't often have a significant impact. And then in early March, the Senate and the Assembly will release their one-house budgets, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's what the Senate wants to see in the budget for the year, and it's what the Assembly wants to see or thinks the budget should look like for the year. Late March, the governor, the speaker, and the majority leader will go behind a door and really just kind of trade back and forth until they come to a conclusion or a budget that looks good to all three folks. And then only at that point is a final budget released to the public, and that budget is signed. The due date for that is April 1st. Our legislative session ends June 12th this year. So a lot of the work done within our legislative session is done between that April 1st date and June 12th. So it is a very tight timeline to get a lot of work done, which is why it's really important that folks are speaking with one voice, because it makes our voice louder. And we've got to be loud so that we can be heard over the cacophony of other advocacy groups and issues that legislators are going to be hearing about up at the Capitol. So let's see. So that's a little bit about the legislative session. We track a number of different issues throughout the state, and we take action on bills or pieces of legislation. We typically do this when a bill is in committee or on a committee agenda, or if we know that it's going to come to the floor for a vote. So you can see kind of a general list here of some of what that action might look like. Maybe we're sending a memo, maybe we're writing a letter, maybe I'm going up to the Capitol and talking to legislators one-on-one about what bills we'd like to see passed. Maybe we're pulling the media in by hosting a press conference. There's a lot of different ways and a lot of creative ways that you can and we can have our voice be heard on the issues that we care about and on the bills that we want to see our representatives pass. So the biggest issue or the biggest question that is probably on your minds is how do we decide which issues are important and what do we decide to take action on? So on this slide, I'm going to walk you through the process of really kind of how we do just that. Absolutely everything starts with impact on issues. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to impact. This is the bread and butter of what we do, the way in which we can only take action on an issue if we have a position on it in impact. And how do you get a position in impact? Essentially, we ask all of our local leagues are able to propose. We have annual meetings once a year, and all of our local leagues are able to propose issues for study. If we don't have a position on something, then we need to do a statewide study in order to get a position on something. And then all local leagues will vote on that study. We have 2 that are pending right now that you all may be discussing. And if we have a consensus, then that study or that position will be adopted as a new position and put it into impact and will allow us to take action on a bill, for example, that might fit within that position. So the program process is a very lengthy process. That's a very quick overview, but I'd be happy to answer more questions about it later. But really, when we get into kicking off our legislative year is when we're looking at putting out our legislative agenda. So the legislative agenda broadly discusses our positions on topic areas that have been a focus or that we expect to be a focus in the next legislative calendar. We work with our issue specialists to see if there are any significant changes that need to be made, but it really just acts as a broad roadmap for our legislative session. The next thing we'll do is we'll ask all of our local leagues to complete a local leagues priority survey. So some of your local leagues have already answered this, but it's a chance to let your local league know what you think the top priorities, top issues should be going into this next session. Your local league will submit one form on behalf of the league, and then we look at all of those priorities and in conjunction with a conversation with our issue specialists and kind of our knowledge of what we think is going to be kind of a hot button issue this legislative session. And all of that really guides what we decide to advocate on, both as the budget is being processed and then after the budget. So that brings me to some of this pre-budget lobbying. So all of the lobbying that's being done like around this time is really being done around the budget. Policy needs to be funded, and that's where the budget comes in. So for example, one of the things that we will ask for this year in the budget is going to be $51,000. It's a real drop in the bucket in order to fund a database to help clean up our voter rolls. So we're really looking at bills that have a fiscal impact, and that's what we are asking for from our legislators, to include funds for these issues in the House budgets that they will be proposing in March. After the budget is finalized, we will release what's called the post-budget lobbying packet. So this is a packet that will go out to all local leagues and advocacy chairs, and this really includes the bills that we're going to take action on through the end of the session. And again, we're using insight from our issue specialists and feedback that we got from members earlier in the session to craft this packet. The last thing that we do is we have a statewide advocacy day. Statewide advocacy day this year will be held May 6th. Folks are encouraged to come on down to the Capitol. We will hear from a variety of experts in the morning, and then we'll head up to the Capitol to lobby our representatives together. All right, so what can you do? What can you do as a member of the league to really get involved? So the first thing you can do is to take action on local issues, which is more critical now than ever. Just a reminder that only your president can speak on behalf of your league unless they have asked you to speak on behalf of your league. You can join a statewide issue committee. So a number of our issue specialists on the call today have their own committees that meet semi-frequently to discuss the issues that they think are critical or that are critical within their issue areas. So each issue specialist will talk about how you can get involved specifically with their topic. You can participate in identifying the priorities for your league to submit that survey, the Legislative Priorities Survey, which is due on February 15th. You can join us for League Lobby Day, which will be on May 6th, as I said, and more information is to come out about that. And you can talk to your league's advocacy chair. Almost all of our local leagues have an advocacy chair that is in charge of advocacy. They are in charge of coordinating any lobbying efforts that happen with myself and at the state level, and really doing any advocacy at the local level or, all of the levels that we've talked about. Your league's advocacy chair is the one who is coordinating all of that. We have a very exciting opportunity this year. We were awarded a grant from the US League to allow us to build a more robust lobby corps. You say, what is a lobby corps? It's essentially a group of individuals, a group of lobbyists that we have across the state that we can really pull in to use to lobby on specific issue areas. So if there is something that you're passionate about, you love to lobby, this might be a great opportunity for you to join the state's official lobby corps team. We'll be sending out more information on that, and that information will come from your league's advocacy chair. In the interest of time, I'm not going to show you how to look up bills today, but those are the links, which again will go out to folks in the PowerPoint that will be sent out after. Do we have any questions about the process? We've got about 5 minutes for questions here.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that there would be consensus about the priorities, I believe. Meaning that every league in the state has to agree with the proposed legislative priorities? You said the word consensus, so I wasn't sure if it's majority or 100%.
No, I'm glad you asked that, Gina. So the consensus is when we are doing a statewide study. And so a statewide study on an issue. So for example, there's 2 studies that are out right now, one on ranked choice voting and open primaries, and the other on how our voting machines are the process of certification. And so that is something that each local league will have a meeting on, members will vote, and then if the league is for or against that issue, that will be reported to the state league. And then we need a consensus of a majority of local leagues that either support or oppose that position in order to either add it to our impact on issues or to say, okay, this isn't a position that the majority of members support, so we can't add it to impact.
2/3, Erica.
2/3. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
I think that I've got a question from Lori. I can't see.
She's got
Lori,
her
do you have a
hand.
question?
Got my hand up.
Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, my question was just about the date for that survey. You said February 15th. We're scheduled a meeting for February 22nd. Is there any leeway on that deadline?
So that deadline is going to be the 15th because we're already getting getting into legislative session here, but you don't have to have you can decide what your priorities are in a variety of different ways. You don't necessarily, and the state league doesn't dictate how you do that with your members. So you can do an email, you can do your own survey within your league. Some local leagues just have their boards decide what they think the priorities might be. So there's a variety of different ways you can do it.
Now that you jogged my memory, it takes a while, but yes, that is what I did last year, is sent out a survey to our members, and then we talked about what the survey results from our members were after we had turned that in at our grand planning meeting. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Got a question about will we be discussing the issues? Yes, right after this, I'm going to hand it over to our issue specialists who are going to talk about the specific issues that that we expect to be hot topics this year. Just want to make sure we're addressing any questions about how we do some of this work at the state level. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
I muted myself. When will that survey come out from the state?
The priority survey?
Yeah,
Oh, that one's been out. I will forward it again to all presidents to make sure that folks have it.
the priority survey is already out? Okay,
Yes, yep.
I did not see it.
I'll get that over to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from folks? No? All
I have a
right.
question about the grant, where the lobbying corps would be lobbying.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks, Pat. So our lobbying corps is to lobby in Albany. So it's to lobby on statewide issues. That being said, you know, the technology has expanded the way that we can lobby. So if you're a part of the lobbying corps, while it would be great for you to come to Albany, you don't have to be in Albany. You can lobby your representative virtually, or you can lobby them when they're in their own home district, which they take a few long breaks that they'll be in their home district for a while. But it is to lobby on statewide issues. All right. So I'm going to keep us moving here. If you do have questions, put them in the chat and I'd be happy to answer them as well.
Erica.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Donna. Hi.
Thanks. Hi. Our league has already turned in what we prioritize for the state topics. We did receive that, I think, in December, and so handle that in January. But in the survey that you send out, you want us to also prioritize for you what our local issues are. How is that used? Is that used to kind of determine if there's a lot of local leagues looking at the same things that will help determine what the state is going to be focusing on too?
I think we're only asking for you to focus or to prioritize what you think we should take action on the state level in that survey.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood them because we had already sent that in, and I thought that this was something that I think question 43 or something like that was asking about prioritizing it. I thought it read our local issues. So
Oh, that must be a different survey. This survey is very short. It's just 3 questions. What are your top 3 issues we think we should tackle this legislative session?
no, that one we've already done. That's
okay.
It's a different
All right,
one.
great. Let me know if you need to revise it for any reason. Just let me know. But
we won't. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so if folks have any other questions, feel free to add those in the chat. But without further ado, let's keep on moving. So I'm going to introduce our issue specialists and committee chairs who are going to talk to you about their issue areas. So first we'll be joined by Regatas Appling and Richard Rifkin, who are the co-chairs of our Criminal Justice Committee. I'll leave this up here so folks can grab their email addresses and go ahead, Regatas and Richard, I'll hand it over.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Erica. Let me just say that our Criminal Justice Committee meets on a regular basis. We meet about once a month, and we talk about various issues in the criminal justice field to try to create and develop a more fair system in the way our criminal justice system works. That's our objective, to have fairness in the criminal justice system. And let me just say that one of the things we focused on over the years, which will not surprise you, is voting while in jail, because people who are in jail other than for a felony are entitled to vote. We've done a long study, a complex study. This happening over a couple of years. We've spoken with the sheriffs, and we are trying to promote voting in jail, which is in many ways a very large problem, but we feel this is critical to the League of Women Voters. So that's one of our overall objectives that continue throughout the years. It's not this year or next year. We keep trying to move in that direction, and there is some movement in that direction. There are other organizations that are involved, and I think we are making headway, but that's that's an overall issue that we continue to work on. And to talk about this year's priorities, let me turn it over to Regatas, my co-chair, and she can fill you in on what we're looking at specifically in this legislative session.
Thanks so much, Richard, and hello. Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Yes, as Richard said, we're really focused on trying to make things within the criminal justice system fair and have that enfranchisement of the rights that we all enjoy, that people who either are incarcerated or going through the criminal justice system also have. So one of the main things this year is discovery rollbacks. And discovery really means that when you have a case in criminal court, the evidence against you, in New York, there was a blindfold law, meaning that the prosecutor didn't have to turn over the evidence to the defense until the day of trial. So there are lots of people going through the system and just pleading guilty, really, without knowing what the evidence is against them. That was reformed in 2020, but it seems that they want to roll back those reforms. And so that's something that is really important in the governor's budget. And there's a lot of advocacy around it. And it's now being kind of named Kalief's Law. And that is named after Kalief Browder, who sat on Rikers Island for over 2 years with the charge of stealing a backpack. And he refused to plead guilty because he said he didn't steal the backpack. None of the evidence was turned over until his case was eventually dismissed 2 years later after sitting on Rikers for 2 years. And he did, in fact, unfortunately, commit suicide after staying on Rikers Island for 2 years. So it's a strong story that supports many other stories like it, where evidence just isn't given over right away. And we cured that. There's no reason to roll it back. Main topic that we have been talking about for years in criminal justice is elder parole and fair and timely parole. And that means that we're advocating that people who are over the age of 55, who have served 15 years of their sentence, have the opportunity to have a parole hearing and opportunity to be released. So basically releasing people from the ages of 50 to 65. It is just been determined that most people at those ages do not recommit offenses. And it's really humane to allow them to be released from jail. Fair and timely parole goes along with that, and asking that incarcerated individuals be able to have a parole hearing. And, they're just asking for the hearing, really, because they can deny or grant it at the hearing, but just making sure that people who, are elder have that opportunity. A few other fairness sort of issues that we are focusing on. There's the No Slavery Act. Believe it or not, New York State still has slavery as a punishment for crime in their constitution. So this amendment would amend the Constitution to make it so that people who are incarcerated do not have to work or they're not compelled labor through threats or prohibitions. Like they actually can have a choice in whether or not they decide to work while in jail. We also have the fairness and opportunities for incarcerated workers, and that one it's again another fairness one where we're just asking for minimum wage, safety, and healthy working conditions for people who are working in prisons. As you may know, a lot of, basically like all of the furniture and things within like Department of Education and other government places are built by prisoners in New York State. So it would be only fair to have people actually be paid wages and not be forced to work without getting paid or being paid a fair wage. One other just plain, and I'll wrap it up here. I feel like I'm going on and on, but one other easy thing I think for everyone to get behind is jury of our peers. It's a one-line bill. It basically just asks that people who have felony convictions be allowed to serve on juries. We recently in New York enfranchised people with felony convictions to be able to vote before they couldn't. And I think New York is really behind in a lot of these things. A lot of states have already granted people with felony convictions who have already served time and paid their price the ability to serve on juries. I can't really think of a reason why they shouldn't serve on juries. And so that's another thing to get behind. We meet the third Monday of every month. And if you're interested in these issues or want to hear more about any of these issues, please join us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Regatas, and thank you so much, Richard. I will, for folks, be putting, I know everybody loves a survey. I'll be putting a very, very brief survey in the chat so that folks can indicate if they'd like to hear more from about any of these issues from our issue specialists. So I will put that in the chat shortly here. But it's I'm back in the hot seat because I will now be talking with our issue specialist, Kate Doran, on election law and election issues. So Kate is going to talk a little bit more about kind of how you can get involved, and I will kick it off by talking about some of the work that we expect to be doing. So I see, Dinah, I see that you have your hand raised. We're actually going to hold off on questions until the end of the session now. But you can put it in the chat if you'd like. So a few of the issues that we expect to see as big issues this session include having New York State join a voter database such as ERIC, which stands for the Electronic Registration Information Center. It essentially is a multi-state voter list maintenance organization. The way in which New York State organizes its voter rolls is done very differently in each county, and it's a huge administrative burden on local election officials. I was talking with several commissioners at a conference recently, and that was one of the things they frequently brought up, is that matching voter applications was so time consuming. And in particular, if a voter has moved from New York State to Massachusetts, for example, all of that work is incredibly time intensive to identify that. And so something like ERIC would really help with that load and would be able to identify those voters, as it's a multi-state platform that just over 25 states are a part of nationwide. One of the biggest points of mis and disinformation around our elections is that folks often target our voter rolls and how inconsistent they might be. And so this is one of the key and a very easy way to ensure that we're able to clean up our voter rolls and to make our system more transparent and as clean and as efficient as possible. As I said, it would also take some of the stress off of local boards of elections. The other issue that we are thinking will be another hot topic this year is reintroducing the work around same-day voter registration. This year, we saw countless voters show up to the polls looking to vote in a massive presidential election, but were turned away because they were not registered to vote. Many, many other states have same-day voter registration, and that was often the common refrain we heard from voters. Oh, I just moved from Maryland. In Maryland, you can register to vote on the same day. I thought I could do the same in New York. We know it's so difficult to educate voters and to get them the information they need. And so if a voter were to be able to show up to the polls and cast their ballot, regardless of if they had registered 2 weeks ago or if they're registering on the same day, increases involvement in our democracy and really would cut out a lot of the issues we also see around poll workers that are sometimes hesitant to give folks affidavit ballots. Again, turning folks away from the polls when they've expressed an interest in going out and letting their voice be heard. Then lastly, we will talk most likely, as Richard and Margada said, about voting in jails. Hazel Weiser, who I know is on this call, conducted an incredible qualitative survey in the summer of 2023 that looked at how folks are able to have access to the ballot while detained in jails across New York State. Unfortunately, we found that only 11 out of the 62 counties surveyed had really any sort of program in place to facilitate access to the ballot. This is a huge issue because we know that disproportionately, 78% of New York's pretrial population is Black or Latino. And so it is really another form of racial suppression and really denying folks access to the ballot when they are still given that right. So this is something that we'll talk a lot more about as we go into session, along with some of these other issues. And I'm going to hand it now over to Kate, who's going to talk to you more about how you can get involved.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very, very much for spending this time with us. Thank you, Erica, for all your prep. Couldn't do it without Erica. So I am Kate Doran. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of the City of New York, and I've been election specialist for a number of years. So Erica wants me to talk about grassroots up from the groundwork, but let me say one quick thing about the ERIC bill. ERIC is not-for-profit and nonpartisan. So right up our street, definitely the kind of organization we want to align ourselves with. They are a membership organization. And I believe, Erica, that the Senate has voted for New York State to join, but the Assembly has not. I think that's where we're at. Is that correct?
Yes, the Senate passed the bill and the Assembly has yet to pass the bill,
Yes.
which is
so
what
that's
happened
the
last year
bill.
as well.
But we're very anxious for all of you in your local leagues to take a closer look at this one and really encourage your members to, you can speak, when you speak to your representatives, you can tell them that the league supports this if you have the permission of your president and your board. So grassroots, on the ground movement, that's really what I care about. I'm a poll worker, and I would encourage any league member to look into it, to think about becoming a poll worker. The law was changed several times to loosen the restriction on that full day of work, which is really, really, it's daunting. 5 in the morning till what the law says is the close of polls. And depending on how complicated or popular that particular election is, you could be there till very, very late. But the law provides for split shifts. It does not have to be that way. So the second part of my suggestion is pay attention to your county board of elections. As we all know, there are 62 counties in New York State. The law provides for 1 Democrat, 1 Republican commissioner in each of the counties. New York City has 5 counties, and the law says that they have to operate as 1 board of elections. So I go to those meetings and I'm looking at 10 commissioners on the dais. But I've gotten to know them, and I can tell you over nearly a dozen years, they start to respect what the league has to say. They're very open to suggestions we make, and it works. I mean, I don't know if you can get a face-to-face meeting, but start by looking at the website of your county BOE. Easy thing to do. Look at the website, say, wow, this is voter friendly. This will help the voters, or this won't. For example, in New York City, we have sample ballots. That's a simple thing to see. Look at your county BOE and see if they offer sample ballots for any upcoming election. A terrific way that you can make a difference. Suggest it. People love to know what they're going to be faced with before they get to the polls. Now, the other thing that Erica wants me to talk about is an election committee. Now, I have very strenuously resisted the idea of chairing a committee, but I'm can't tell you how much I enjoy working with Erica. And if she's sweet talking me into doing this, I'm in. So let us know if you want to be part of an election committee. We are the League of Women Voters. So much of what we lobby for is election related. And you all know what a huge difference it makes in
making elections more accessible and convenient. We have early voting now since 2019. And we all love it. We essentially have no excuse absentee voting because we have early vote by mail. And we work very, very closely. Both Erica and I are on the Let New York Vote Coalition, and that's comprised of various other good government groups whose names you all know. And in coalition and strategizing about priorities, we can make a difference. Now, Erica wanted me to mention that we are an independent organization, of course, and we don't necessarily support everything that the Let New York Vote Coalition supports, but I would say it's pretty close to most. There are a few things, but we are very active and happy to be a member of the Let New York Vote Coalition. Is there anything else you want me to mention, Erica?
No, Kate, I think you hit on all of our high notes. I want to highlight for everyone that I've just put a form into the chat, and I will do it again. So if you are interested in getting involved in any of these committees, fill out the form and indicate which committee you'd like to get involved in, and the issue specialists will reach out to you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to hand it on over to our this is some of the work we're doing. I'm going to hand it on over to Beth Radow, who's going to talk about our work with the environment. Go ahead, Beth.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. I chair the Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment, and we establish our goals through the lens of the climate emergency, consistent with the League's unanimous adoption of a resolution declaring climate change an emergency at the 2021 biannual convention. In 2025, we will support select legislation, perform research, provide programming, comment on existing legislation that is not living up to its stated goals, and encourage your engagement locally to initiate civics initiatives with neighbors and students. The Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, aka CLCPA, passed by the New York State Legislature, measures to put the state on a path to reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions using benchmarks. We support legislation aimed to meet these goals. As many as you know, it can take several legislative sessions to pass a bill into law, and this year we will continue to focus on the following two bills and leave room for possibly passage of the Extended Producer Responsibility Bill that creates a program substantially reducing packaging, especially plastics, establishes mandatory standards for waste reduction and recycling, reduces use of toxic chemicals, and prohibits incineration. We will also continue our support for passage of the Bigger Better Bottle Bill that is intended to expand the required types of beverages sold in glass and plastic bottles that require deposits to include non-carbonated and alcoholic beverages, and increases the deposit from a nickel to a dime. The League supported the original bottle bill that was enacted in June of 1982 and became effective in July of 1983. In addition to passing new laws, studying and reporting on existing conditions can help us lead toward improving public policy and practices that manage the climate impacts. League members in the Albany and Syracuse regions have been focused on solid waste management. Discussions are in progress to provide programming on reducing consumer use of single-use plastic. Failure to minimize the solid waste leads to the need to expand landfills, which is something that is a topic right now, and that would be paid for by increased property taxes. We plan to dive into that topic to educate and improve policy. We seek to address the non-compliance with the benchmarks of the CLCPA to the extent that you as members can become involved. Identifying specific unmet benchmarks with the CLCPA will enable the League to send comments to the governor and legislators where applicable to advocate for compliance with the CLCPA. We will lobby for the development of renewable energy to meet emissions goals and slow climate change. This includes commenting on any plans to support technology that demands the build out of climate warming infrastructure. It will also include studying and commenting on the governor's proposal to use nuclear energy. We will likewise share the results of our research to educate the public and encourage public comment. Speaking of public education, we have been in communication with the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force, consisting of a coalition of students, educators, NGOs, and community members managed by the National Wildlife Federation to enlist lawmakers and the New York State Education Department to expand access to climate education and teacher training in New York State, who in turn would teach and prepare our next generation to handle the challenges the climate emergency will bring to bear. A good news, on November 4th, 2024, at a public meeting of the Board of Regents, New York State Ed unveiled a plan to include climate education as part of the new graduation requirements beginning in 2026-2027. We will continue to be involved in the rollout of this important development. The League supports policies that protect safe food production, regenerative agriculture, and putting food to productive use with a priority to redirect edible excess food to the state's food insecure population. Expanding the existing food donation legislation is a laudable goal we support. However, the existing law is not being effectively enforced. Not enough people to check up what our food outlets are doing with their excess edible food. So as a result, the groceries required to donate their food are discarding the food in dumpsters. Consider having a friendly conversation with the local supermarket manager to find out which organizations that serve the local food insecure residents they donate their excess edible food to. If you get a non-response, the key to the cure involves connecting the stores with a local group that has a mission and identify someone to transport the food. This could be a great project for students at a local community college to take on with local League member guidance. Finally, two distinct programming priorities I am developing involve, first, the impact of extreme weather on property value and insurability, and second, environmental impacts on fetal development and post-birth human health. I welcome hearing about your priorities. The more members support democracy through engaging on the topics mentioned above, the more we can accomplish. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Beth. Appreciate it. With that, I will hand it back over to Sally Robinson, who will be joined by Michelle Lamberti, who's also a part of our issues and advocacy team and who's on the state board for New York State. They'll be talking about campaign finance reform, court reform, or campaign finance reform, court reform, and ethics. Sally and Michelle.
Okay, hi. I think it sort of looks like I got the short straw here with the hopeless cause issues, especially ethics and court reform. Despite their challenges and lack of progress, all three of these are deeply rooted in the history of the State League. As some of you might know, campaign finance reform was probably the cause that was closest to the heart of our longtime legislative director, Barbara Bartoletti. One of her favorite points to make was that of all the states with campaign contribution limits, New York had the highest, and virtually no limits on personal use of campaign funds. Unfortunately, no progress has been made on the personal use issue, and not surprisingly, there doesn't seem to be much appetite in the legislature for it, or for anything else that tightens campaign finance. However, there is one area in which there has been success, and that is in instituting a public campaign finance system based on the New York City system after many years of advocacy by a wide range of groups. Participating candidates get matching public funds for smaller contributions, up to $250 from their district in return for accepting lower general contribution limits. 2024 was the first year this went into effect for candidates for the legislature, and 2026, it will go into effect for statewide candidates. Before the system went into effect for legislative candidates in 2024, the state legislature tried to weaken the system, but that was vetoed by the governor after a vigorous campaign against it by the League and other good government groups. So that we have had one success in this area, and hopefully there won't be another attempt to weaken the system before it goes into effect. Ethics. So over the years, as legislative leaders, went to prison, and New York gained the reputation as one of the most corrupt states, if not the most corrupt state in the country. The League worked continuously on trying to get what we always termed independent state ethics enforcement in New York. A longstanding joke in Albany was that state legislators would file their disclosure forms in paper. Why do you think they would always walk it over in paper? Because they were avoiding the real cop in the room, federal prosecutors filing wire fraud charges. So, and as the Supreme Court recently, I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but recently the Supreme Court has made it harder to bring corruption charges against legislators, and several of them, including in New York, have been overturned. But we worked for many years. There used to be I can't even remember what the name of the original ethics was before 2011. But in 2011, there was a compromise where something went into place called the Joint Commission on Public Ethics. And unfortunately, right after that, we got a very strong governor, and he sort of took control of it. And there was a lot of frustration that it needed to be improved on. So a couple years ago, we got the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. And that is currently being, that part of how that was structured was to try and make it more independent of the governor as sort of a direct consequence of how much Cuomo tried to interfere with it. So that commission, elegantly called COLEG, is currently being challenged in court by that same governor as unconstitutional. And both the trial court and the appellate division found it unconstitutional. And there was an argument in January before the Court of Appeals, and a decision is probably likely expected later this month. The League we've always believed this. The League has always believed that the true way to get independent ethics enforcement is a constitutional amendment. So you take out questions about the independence if the independence from the executive making it unconstitutional. So if in fact the Court of Appeals does say that COLEG is unconstitutional, then it's going to be very interesting to see what will happen in the legislature. Is it sort of going to be temporarily fixed, or is there going to be a real appetite to get a constitutional amendment and a truly independent ethics enforcement? So that's something that's probably going to play out. Well, something is going to have to happen. If the Court of Appeals upholds the lower decision, something I assume will have to happen in this legislative session. At least a temporary fix, but we're hoping for the ultimate solution will be a constitutional amendment. Okay, the last issue, court reform. And this is something I went back and looked at impact on issues, which is, for those of you who are asking questions, not only a compendium of our positions, but it's also a history of our positions. And I realized that the position on a unified statewide court system, as announced by the board in 1957, is, I think, the oldest position in our state impact. We had positions and worked on a number of issues before, but I don't think they were quite codified in the same way. And after a study in 1957, this unified statewide court system is, I think, the oldest position in impact. And particularly in the 70s and 80s, the League played a very leading role in pushing for court reform and merit selection of judges. So it's very deep in our history and our reputation in Albany. And now I'll turn it over to Michelle, talk about anything that's happening now.
Thanks, Sally. And I'll give a quick overview. Thank you for that. Sally did remind me about the deep history of the League last night. I hadn't realized that it was one of our first positions. So the League is also a board member of the Fund for Modern Courts, where a lot of this work has been like percolating in New York in the last number of years. To Sally's point, we have a very confusing court system in New York State. In reviewing it last night, I realized that we have 11 different types of trial courts, which may seem not like a large number, but is the largest in the United States, and just makes it a very difficult system for litigants, particularly poor or unrepresented litigants to navigate. And so we have argued for greater court simplification since that beginning position, to limited effect, but we will continue to do so. We also think that we are advocating on behalf of a 3-court model, so a 3-tier model to make things a little bit easier, and to also ensure that there is adequate funding, particularly for family and housing courts, just because that's where I'd probably say the bulk of our unrepresented litigants wind up, and because they have such serious consequences for individuals' lives. I know we are short for time. One of the other bills that we introduced last year, or we supported last year, was a bill by Senator Hoylman Siegel and Assembly Member Borres, and that was also for a statewide trial court of unlimited original jurisdiction to hear cases outside the authority of the lower courts, also an attempt to make things a little bit easier. We also pushed last year. I don't remember what the breakdown is, but we are one of a number of courts, I'm not sure if it's the majority or minority, states that have systems that don't allow cameras or recording in courtrooms. And so there was a push last year to try to change that. Sadly, it was unsuccessful, but I'd say that those are a few of the issues that we've been active on, also increasing, as I said, the number of family and housing court judges. So sadly, not a lot of progress, but an area that we will continue to work in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Sally. We are running a little bit behind, but that's okay. We'll be on until 11:30 for folks who have any questions, but we've got at least 4 more issue specialists who are going to talk about their priorities. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Barb Thomas, who is the issue specialist for 2 of our issue areas currently, medical aid in dying and equality of opportunity. Barb?
Hi, can you show my first slide for this?
Sure.
So in 2018, the League of Women Voters of New York State adopted by a concurrence that 30 of our leagues participated in, a position that states that the League of Women Voters of New York State believes state laws should grant the option for a terminally ill person to request medical assistance from a relevant licensed physician to end one's life. And the League of Women Voters believes such legislation should include safeguards against abuse of the dying and protections for medical personnel who act in good faith compliance with the law. The medical aid in dying bill that is being proposed in the New York State legislature meets those requirements. The bill is very similar to the bill that was passed in Oregon in 1994, but has strengthened safeguards against coercion of the patient. Right now, there are 10 states plus the District of Columbia that have similar laws, including our neighbors, Vermont and New Jersey. In order to receive a prescription for the medication to terminate your life, you must be 18. Within 6 months of death, be mentally sound, request the medication from 2 different physicians who agree that you meet the requirements, have witnesses who aren't going to inherit from you, and be able to ingest the medication on your own. In the 31 years since Oregon first adopted the law, and in all the rest of the states with this compassionate option, there has never been an instance of abuse of the law that anybody has ever reported. I have been working to get this law passed since I first suggested concurring with the Utah position in 2016, because my husband had an always fatal brain cancer that made it impossible for him to do any of the things he liked. And he couldn't even shoot himself, so he wanted me to shoot him. I still feel guilty that I didn't do that, which is why I keep working on this. We have a very good chance to pass medical aid in dying this year. We already have more than enough votes in the Assembly, and we are advocating with the new members of the Senate. And you can help make that happen. Next slide. Experience has shown that the most effective way to contact your representatives is by talking with them in person. And next best is sending a handwritten letter. And after that, making a phone call, explaining why you support the legislation. Other ways to help are to phone bank, to encourage supporters to actually contact their representatives in those ways. And a very effective way, especially if you live near Albany, is to join advocates in the Capitol on Tuesdays, being visible in the wind tunnel. So there are contact things there. Next slide. I'm also the advocate for equality of opportunity. And that's a broad area of concern with overlap with education, rural issues, and healthcare. Last year, we put all our reproductive rights efforts into passing POP 1. This year, the effort will be on funding to provide support to clinics to provide those services. And then pay equity. Equal pay for jobs requiring the same level of training and skills, not just equal pay for the same jobs. But so it causes us to support increased funding for childcare, for the wages of childcare workers, for home care and the wages of home care workers. Because these are jobs that are mainly held by women, especially women of color, and because of long-standing societal prejudices, the skills they require are undervalued. Additionally, women are often forced to leave the workforce to provide uncompensated child and elder care, thus affecting their lifelong earning ability. We will be supporting increased funding for these services. And that's it. I will turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Barb. Appreciate it. And thank you, as always, for sharing your powerful story around medical aid in dying and for all the work you do. Every time I'm at the Capitol, I run into Barb. So, and it's always a nice day when I do. With that, let's move on over to education, which is education finance is a huge issue this year. And so I will hand it over to Dr. Marion Bott.
Unmute, there we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm Marion Bott. I am a member of the New York City League of Women Voters. We used to have an education committee, and I love going to their meetings when they happen. Back in about 2004, I think I became the education finance specialist for the State League. And I recall this conversation with Sally when I said, just education finance, not all of education, because I don't have the bandwidth for all of education. So I'm going to give you an example of what that means for us in terms of lobbying and focus. This past Wednesday was the legislative hearing for the education budget. This gave us precious little time because the governor didn't announce her budget until January 21st. And this hearing on January 29th caused us to rush to go over everything. But back to Erica's presentation of what we can lobby about and what we can't lobby about, and impact on issues being our Bible. I will give you some amusing episodes from the dialogue that took place between the legislators and the testifiers. And I'll start with cell phones. Now, the League of Women Voters of New York State does not have a position on whether kids should or should not have cell phones in their possession during the school day. But boy, is that a hot topic right now. And it leads to a budget issue because the governor put $13.5 million in the state budget to provide for some sort of means whereby the kids could bring their phones to school and have them safely sequestered during the day. Anyway, so in the budget testimony, someone basically said, well, the cost of that's really $37, depending upon how it's implemented, and it should be left to the localities, et cetera. So why am I even talking about this? The league doesn't have a position on it. So even if I wanted to talk about cell phones, I couldn't. But this does lead to the issue that was raised earlier about people having committees. Way back when we did the education study in 2005, 2006, we had a big committee because we were studying lots of things. We were studying STAR, we were studying gambling, and also charter schools. So we had a big statewide committee. I would love to.
I'll call you back in half an hour.
I'm sorry, what was that? I guess someone is not being muted. Anyway, so it would be great to have a committee. The second thing that came up in the hearings, it's also budget related, but we don't have a position on, is electric buses. So I think Beth Ratto may still be on the call. This is controversial because all of the testifiers who are against the full implementation of electric buses say that the mandate for putting in electric buses is going to break their budgets. It's a substantial amount of money, especially for the rural districts, and also the technology just doesn't work for them. How are they charging these electric buses? The amount of real estate that they need to actually park these buses in a charging stand. So they're basically saying it was a great mandate, but it doesn't work financially. So Beth and I can talk about that offline. But again, this is a situation where the league doesn't have a position. We have a position on money, though. And so this is another one of those things that I would love to hear from people who don't just live in New York City, represent leagues that are all around the state, because this can make a difference. You're either going to have teachers and classroom support, or you're going to have the money going into the electric buses. So it is, in fact, it's a sticky issue, because if they're mandated to do it, and then it costs them in the school budget, that's not a good thing. And then another thing that came up in the hearings was special education and general paraprofessionals. This came up actually at the very end of the hearing because the New York City union representative, Michael Mulgrew, said that they cannot get paraprofessionals in classrooms in adequate amounts because they're paying them $31,000 a year. The classroom teachers themselves get about twice that. We're talking about New York City. These numbers would obviously be different in other localities. But the point is that paraprofessionals in a classroom are crucial when class sizes are large. They're crucial for any special education kid. If you are struggling in a classroom and you are legally entitled to be included in a regular classroom and there's no paraprofessional to help you, this is a very bad situation. Now, we don't have a specific position that goes to that level of nuance, but we definitely have a position that covers the notion that we want a quality education for every child in our state. So this is a budget issue, and the way it came up in these hearings is that here I am, Marian Wonk, worrying about the foundation aid formula revisions, which were the focus of my testimony, having to do with these important changes to foundation aid, which were, if you don't know what foundation aid is, it's basically the big driver of resource allocations in the elementary and secondary budget. And it underwent a big study by the Rockefeller Institute during this past year because the governor mandated that Rockefeller Institute provide a study. And we testified in July at those hearings. And then the final report came out December the 1st. And then the idea was that the governor would incorporate whatever of the suggestions that she felt that she could incorporate into that from Rockefeller into the budget. So people were most cranky over the fact that she only took a few of the recommendations from Rockefeller and did not institute some of the others. For example, we've been fighting for years, and we were successful in getting, together with many other advocates, a regional cost index into our school finance formula. So, but people felt that it was 20 years out of date and it needed to be updated because there are only really 9 regions. And it seemed to almost everyone that a regional cost index needed to be more nuanced so that it doesn't cut across. For example, in Westchester County alone, there are so many different economic pockets that lumping all of Westchester County into one regional cost index area struck a lot of people as just not fair. Same thing with Long Island and New York City being lumped together. So, but she didn't make any changes in that. And I think the primary reason she didn't is because she recognized that there were going to be losers and winners. And she wasn't going to get any political mileage out of changing the regional cost index. However, she did change the 2 big drivers of aid, which were it's the census count. They were using old census numbers from 2000. And then they also changed they threw away the use of free and reduced price lunch data. And not to get too much in the weeds, but under President Obama, Michelle Obama fought for healthy meals in every school. And as a result, schools became community eligible so that parents really had no reason to fill out these free and reduced price lunch forms, which provided their income levels. And then basically high schoolers don't fill them out either. So, and middle schoolers don't fill them out. So the poverty, the accuracy of poverty measures based on who's getting lunch were sort of invalidated from that point on. And now the governor has basically said that she thinks that what we should be budgeting for is free meals, breakfast and lunch for all children, no matter what their economic circumstances. Now, here's
Marian?
yeah.
Oh, Marian, I know we could talk about education for so long. We've got just 2 others to get to before we end our time. So I might ask you to wrap it up, and I can boost your testimony in the chat for everyone.
Okay, so long story short, Education Committee would be helpful to me because the business about, we don't have a position on whether meals should be part of an education budget. I have my personal views on it, but that's not a league position. I agonize over that because that's a very expensive thing to be doing. And I think more money should go in the classroom, but I can't speak on that in Albany. So committee, please. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Marian. Appreciate it. All right, so let's see. We are going to move right on along to healthcare, and then after healthcare, we'll hear about rural issues. So I'll hand it over to Judy Esterquest to talk about healthcare.
Thank you, Erica. I'm okay. Thank you, Erica. And I really appreciate this Hot Topics every year. I think it's informative, and I appreciate everybody who showed up and is staying with us. So thank you. So a couple of things. We have a committee that meets about 8 times a year, and just a couple of things. First, since healthcare is almost 1/5 of our GDP, it affects every single one of us. There are many, many healthcare reforms we care about, and some are prioritized by other issue committees, as you will note soon. So I'm not going to mention them I may mention them only briefly. We would love everybody on this call to join us in advocating for league healthcare goals, specifically to move us closer to affordable, accessible, equitable healthcare for every resident of New York State. These goals make us passionate about the New York Health Act, which was introduced last week. And this spring, for that act, we will be seeking to convert legislators who now sponsor it to become active advocates and to educate voters about it. So, league members, please consider holding an education event about this bill, which is squarely supporting league goals, and our committee members will absolutely help you. So, our pre-budget priorities. First, trying to hold Medicaid coverage steady in the face of federal cuts, which we know are coming. Last year, Medicaid funding was extended from a year after birth to age 6 without churn, but without more pediatricians and family providers. Kids still will not have access to vaccinations, well child checkups, early medical and behavioral interventions, which may be at epidemic levels since the pandemic. So covering small children is fast, cheap, and high value, lifelong high value. Rural areas in the state have about half the number of pediatricians as urban areas. And 40% of New York State 2-year-olds across the state have not yet been fully vaccinated. So we are facing a potential public health crisis right over the horizon. We want to extend essential care to the underinsured and undocumented. Federal waivers may be revoked, but uninsured adults use emergency rooms when they do not have primary care providers, an extraordinarily expensive way of using state funds. State funds pay for emergency rooms. Primary care could reduce total spend and protect public health. Similarly, we have data that when incarcerated people leave prisons with Medicaid in place, it reduces recidivism, overdoses, and improves the chances of keeping employment. We have serious provider shortages. It's crisis, particularly among frontline providers, pediatricians, their nurses, and child intervention therapists, family physicians, physician assistants, geriatricians, EMTs, doulas, healthcare aides. Almost all of these are in serious shortage. We need multi-pronged state action. There's working at the top of license and multi-state contracts, which the governor mentions, but those will really only dent the shortage. We need investment in training, in wages, and we need to recruit more providers and provide job conditions that reduce moral injury and burnout, which are causing early retirement. Kathy will talk about home care and CDPAP being under threat. I'd like to add that federal threats to immigration will make things worse. Immigrants make up 17% of the workforce, but constitute over 40% of home health aides. We have a crisis shortage of home care aides now. Immigration, deportation, and putting people into the shadows will worsen it. And further, the number of New York State retirees will grow to 25% in the next 15 years. That will make the demand even worse. Kathy will also speak about a continuing crisis in EMS and paramedicine. Despite recent reforms, more are needed. Now, some bills could save New York State billions in budget. For example, eliminating excess profits from Medicare managed care and/or by redeploying excess reserves from HMOs that are making profits called excess revenues, or by manufacturing at-cost generic drugs. There are a number of bills, some of which are having trouble getting traction, that could save billions. Finally, the governor last month vetoed as too expensive the facility transparency bill that would require hospitals to post standard of care procedures that the hospital won't offer. Like some hospitals won't honor DNRs, and some won't do D&Cs after miscarriages, which are life-saving. Such transparency might well create market disadvantages for hospitals that hide such policies, but should hospitals be protected over patients? Finally, we have some legislative priorities, next page, which we will discuss this spring, so I'm not going to spend much time on them. New York Health Act, medical aid in dying, medical debt, telemedicine, which is being threatened, shield laws, where I don't know if you know that Louisiana has indicted a New York physician for telemedicine prescription of medical abortion. That was 2 days ago. Health equity assessment having to do with closing hospitals. Kathy will talk about that. There are a number of bills we'll be talking about, and we'll explain why. But let's go to the next page because we're behind. So there are intersectional priorities. You've heard from Equal Opportunity and MAID, the Rural Caucus you're about to hear from, Education and Finance. Marianne didn't have a chance to talk about school-based health clinics, but she did mention universal free breakfast and lunch and mental health. Our criminal justice group and healthcare work together. And obviously, the environment is something that is very much about health. So next page. So we would love for you to get involved with us by helping us advocate for legislation. You could come to our meetings. You can join our HCC News. That's Healthcare Committee News. It's a Google group where we try to send out interesting articles a few times a week. We promise not to spam you. And if you would like us, or if you would like help hosting a public education event to promote your league on a healthcare topic or on New York Health, we would be delighted to help. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy.
Tried to keep that under 5 minutes.
I think you nailed it. So the last but certainly not least, I will hand it over to Kathy Stein to talk about rural issues. Kathy has been patiently waiting until the end to talk about these issues. And so I want to give a boost here. This is one of the areas in which we can really pool our voices together to be so critically impactful. Kathy's going to talk about a lot of issues that plague a lot of our cities, but are even worse when it gets to rural environments. And there are frankly fewer people living in rural areas, so their voice isn't quite as strong as some of our cities. But as a league and as an organization, we can put our voice behind these issues and ensure that rural areas have the support they need. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Kathy.
Yes, thanks. Thank you very much, Erica, for noting that. And yeah, I'll be and thank you, Judy, for showing the intersectionality of so many of our issues. If you want to put the first slide on, a just quick little preview of our topics for this session. We meet bi-monthly, the Rural Caucus. You don't have to live in a rural area to join us. Please, reach out. We meet on the first Monday of even numbered months. Okay, so actually next slide, we'll just kind of keep blazing along here. Judy mentioned the workforce shortages, which are severe and worse in rural areas. So we will be watching for any bills that come out, to address those shortages. Rural Caucus members were disappointed by the governor's veto of the Local Input for Community Healthcare Act, LICH. This bill, which passed both houses with broad bipartisan support, has been reintroduced, and it would greatly improve New York State's requirements for oversight of full hospital and hospital unit closures. For example, the current Department of Health guidance calls for only 90 days notice before the closure of a hospital and offers no guidance regarding closure of a hospital unit. This bill would specify 270 and 210 days notice, respectively. Maternity unit closures have created maternity deserts in many rural areas of the state, resulting in long travel times for someone giving birth or having a miscarriage, potentially endangering lives. There is in general a chronic shortage of reproductive care in rural areas. We'd be lost without Planned Parenthood clinics, I assure you. One final healthcare note, we're hoping for progress in ensuring predictable funding for emergency medical and community paramedical services. The executive budget makes EMS an essential service, that's a good thing, but expects counties to raise taxes to pay for it, which is not going to go over well in poor rural areas. More funding is needed as well to recruit and train more EMTs to replace those who are reaching retirement age. Turning now to caregiving, this session, the Rural Caucus will again be closely following proposed legislation to address the lack of affordable, accessible childcare. The shortage of childcare is significantly impacting rural communities' economic growth and the future educational prospects of our children. The executive budget proposes a study to find solutions for the problem, but it's already clear that what is needed is more funding to help providers pay their employees competitive and living wages, as Barb Thomas noted. Nor does the governor's proposal to build more workplace-based childcare facilities do much to help rural areas, where there are few large employers. Home-based care is the norm for us. Despite childcare workers being poorly paid, childcare is unaffordable for many parents. 3 pieces of legislation affecting childcare subsidies passed in both houses last session with unanimous support. 2 were vetoed by the governor. As a consequence, we will once again be advocating for the decoupling of childcare subsidies from hours worked to allow for travel time for parents in rural areas who need to go significant distances to drop off and pick up their kids from childcare providers. We will also be advocating repeal of the minimum income requirement to qualify for childcare subsidies, the other bill vetoed by the governor. The Rural Caucus's Sue Ruff has made us aware of the shortage of early intervention services for children with special needs. The shortage is due to low state reimbursement rates for these trained professionals. In rural areas, the situation is exacerbated by the lack of reimbursement for travel time for therapists. Travel time is required because for very young children, therapy is best done in the home. Next slide, please. Shifting to the other end of the caregiving spectrum, the crisis level shortage of workers in the home care sector continues, especially in rural areas, affecting many disabled and/or elderly New Yorkers. Recent changes to the Consumer Directed Personal Assistant Program, CDPAP, have only thrown gasoline on the fire. New stricter eligibility requirements will almost certainly result in some current CDPAP participants having to enter nursing homes, of which there is a shortage in rural areas. The new financial intermediary chosen by the state to handle payments to caregivers has a checkered history, providing similar services in other states. We will be following legislation that has been introduced to roll back or revise some of these changes. One final priority, the Rural Caucus will be supporting the Lift Our Communities Advertise Locally Act, which would provide tax credits to small and women or minority-owned businesses that advertise in locally owned newspapers. So, final slide, please. Here, oh, well, there we go. Here are some web addresses of some really good coalitions and groups where you can get more information here. And again, please contact me, get on our email list or come to our meetings. All are welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Really appreciate it. And you were right on the nose in terms of timing.
All right.
Thank you all so very much. I know that we are right at time, and so folks may be hopping off. If you want to hop off, feel free to go ahead. I'll leave the Zoom open for just a few minutes if folks have questions they'd like to ask. I know we've been answering a lot of questions in the chat so far, but if folks would like to ask a question out loud, now would be the time to do so. Issue specialists, do not feel like you need to stay on. If there's a question for you and you need to hop, I will make sure that question gets to you. Looks like we've got a question from Gail. Go ahead, Gail. Did I see your hand go up, Gail?
No, my hand did not go up.
Oh, sorry, Gail. Gail Struble.
Oh.
Different Gail. Sorry. No? Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. So with that, I'm going to boost the form and a few
Erica,
pieces.
I see a question from Doria. with a
Oh,
hand
sure. Go
raised.
ahead, Doria. Doria, if you have a question, you can take yourself right on off mute.
I saw a hand raised.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I did. I think this question is for Mary Ann regarding education and economics. I read a couple of positions where the State League had gone to Albany and talked about funding for education, and the term geographic shares was mentioned. Can you tell me what that is and exactly how it functions in helping to determine how education funding is allocated?
Yeah, I can answer the question. I just want to make sure I know who's asking it because I was scrolling through the
This is
question.
Doria Hillsman from Rockland County.
Okay, so it is a non-official but political, well well-kept, not so well-kept secret that the way to get the budget to pass is to make sure that Long Island and New York City and everybody else still gets the same geographic share, no matter what is supposed to be right or fair or equitable. They seem to say that it won't pass until the shares. It's so we've been fighting against the notion because it's ridiculous. But the leaders, especially the ones who've been around for 20 or 25 years, know that the elected representatives, in some cases, even across party lines, they band into geographic blocks. And it's hard to argue that if Long Island didn't get robbed by New York City, or if upstate didn't get robbed by New York City, then all is well. And so it's the reason we mention it is because we fight against it, and we try to show that that's not the way the formula should run. So does that answer the question?
I have a better handle on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion.
Well, if I can answer it better, I can show you the numbers. If that's of any interest, just let me know.
Well, I'll send out all of the email addresses for issue specialists in an email to you all after this presentation. So if folks want to follow up with additional questions, they can. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hey, thanks for the great presentation. I've just moved to New York from another state, so this was really helpful for me to understand some of the things that you're working on. And I was wondering if I heard something correctly. I think it was from the speaker on elections and democracy, that New York doesn't, as a standard practice, offer sample ballots ahead of elections. Is that correct?
Hi, Jenny. I'll try to answer that. I was actually reaching out to the local leagues to find out. We in New York City do have sample ballots on the boards, on the New York City Board of Elections website prior to every election event.
We have them in Rockland also.
Okay, but if you don't have them in your county, I would say that that's something that your league could encourage your Board of Elections commissioners to do. There's no obligation in the law, but there doesn't seem to be a downside, and voters really like it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Jenny, welcome to New York State. We do all county boards do provide sample ballots that will be posted on the website for voters prior to the election. And I forget what the timing is on that exactly.
No, that's good to know.
Weeks in advance. Yes. Yeah.
Thank
If you don't see it, then that's a problem. I said we'd hang on for 5 more minutes for questions, and we are right about at that time. So with that, I'm gonna wrap us up here. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our issue specialists and board members who put so much time into pulling this presentation together. It is truly appreciated. I'll be sending out an email with all the links. Ways that you can reach out to our issue specialists, and ways that we can follow up to really make sure that our voice is heard this session in New York State.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please vote in Westchester for the county supervisor. Early voting begins today. It's been really very poorly advertised.
Boost for Westchester. Thanks, Sheila.
That's me.
Thank
you.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Who's still on here?